Hi everyone, I hope you're well. Welcome to another video, and today we're looking at paints. More specifically, we are looking at the deep shade range by the folk over at AK Interactive, who got in touch with me and asked if I would like to have a look at them and play around with them on some of the War Games figures. And I love paint, so of course I said yes. Now, they sent these to me a few weeks ago, and I've spent that time using them on various miniatures in various projects, and you will have seen the results of using these in a few of the project updates that I've done already. So I've been putting these through their paces, basically seeing how they work and what they're good at, and in my opinion anyway, and this video is essentially me sharing those thoughts with you. Now, there is a whole load of information on these over on the AK Interactive website, and I'll drop a link down below in the description so you can go and have a look for yourselves if you're interested. There's information leaflets, flyers, lots of examples of how the paints can be used, tutorial links on there for how to use each of the paints from that website, and a whole wealth of information. However, what I will do is just give you a brief rundown of the idea behind these, and that is that they have been formulated to obtain simple and fast shading on wargaming miniatures while maintaining an overall matte finish, and I can confirm these do dry incredibly matte. These are basically balanced to find the sort of perfect point between fluidity and viscosity, which is something that, you know, a lot of products struggle to find, and I'll have some comments on that a little later. Essentially, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to roll through each of the paints, which come in these 30ml bottles, screw top bottles. We'll run through each of the paints, take a look at them, and I'll show you a few of the ways that I've applied them and some of the miniatures that I've worked on with them, and give you some thoughts about them. So, one of my main points, and it's one which I suppose is a little bit of a negative. It's the first one, is I just prefer dropper bottles. That doesn't bother everybody. Screw top bottles are completely fine. I personally just prefer dropper bottles. That doesn't mean that the product isn't any good, but if something's in a dropper bottle, I just prefer them. So straight out the door, that's just one thing that I would prefer. But there's nothing to stop me transferring this into a dropper bottle, of course. Now, like all paints, you have to give these a pretty good shake, and I decided that to test these, what I do is I grab some of these Mordor orcs here, because they've got some decent recess detail on them. I would undercoat them white, and I would just use these paints straight out of the bottle to basically show you how they look plain, if that makes sense. Obviously, these are shade paints. These are not contrast paints or speed paints. So these are meant to be used to accentuate shadows on areas that have been painted already with a base color. So I'm going to jump right in and just slap these over a miniature that's been undercoated white, which is probably not the situation you're going to use it in, just to show you how it comes neat out the bottle. Now, this is Invocation Purple, which is designed to be used over cooler tones, but could be used over sort of reds and sandy colours as well. Now, as you put this on, you can see it sort of grips the miniature quite well as it goes on. It doesn't sort of flow where you don't want it to, and as you can see, it dries incredibly matte. Next out of the bag is the colour called Green Dark, which is obviously recommended for application over sort of cooler mint colours, greys and greens. Now, this is reminiscent of the Coelia green shade, and as you can see here on my little orc victim, it does have a nice sort of blue tint to it as well. Out of the 9 colours that were released in the launch of this range, this is one that I have used the most. This is Carmine Dawn, and the sort of GW shade that this is most similar to would be Carroburg Crimson, and so this would be for, you know, going over oranges, reddish sort of colours, skin tones as well, which is what I use it for, and it sort of dries very, very bright, which I like, but still, as you can see, very, very matte. Now, a sepia tone is this hazel brown. Now, this is quite a subtle colour. I found it's good for sort of, you know, subtle shades on lighter tones, beiges, things like that. Now, this shade really does remind me of Seraphim Sepia, and with these, I have found that a couple of coats will help sort of strengthen it. However, to be honest, I quite like the subtle effect of this shade. I used it on sort of hair and fur on a couple of models. Now, next up, we have a bit of an odd one. Now, this is to human skin. Now, you'll be unsurprised to hear that this is basically for use on all sort of skin types. And as you can see, this dries more red-orange than a lot of flesh washes that sort of dry a dark red, and I was actually quite surprised by that, and it took a little while to get used to. I found that this works really well for faces, especially if you want sort of a more sort of stretched out, ragged looking face. It works particularly well. Now, Blue Moon is recommended, funnily enough, for applications over sort of light bluish and greenish tones, and the contrast paint that this reminds me of is Space Wolves Grey. I mean, you can get a really nice looking armor color over on this. Now, as you can see, as I've said previously, and I keep pointing out, this dries very matte. My orc here is looking particularly colourful at the moment, and I'm going to try out now some pure grime. Now, this is very, very similar to Agrak's Earthshade and also to the Army Painter Strong Tone. So this gives you sort of a dark brown, sort of, you know, really sort of crusty looking wash that I've found is probably the most utilitarian of all of the washes. I've just applied this straight over models and then applied highlights. Now, this is probably one of my favourites. This is Black Knight, and this is a black wash. Now, obviously, this would be sort of up against Nuln Oil, and this really does achieve quite a high level of contrast, and you could really apply this to any base coat if you really wanted to accentuate shadow areas. Now, I like this for a completely different reason, which I'm going to come on to in a moment, and I'll show you an example of why. Now, the next shade out of the pot is Reddish Filth. Now, this one sort of, I don't really quite know how to describe this one. Online, it's described as being recommended for application on warm tones, sandy tones, oranges and purples. It reminds me more of a traditional flesh shade, so sort of like Reikland flesh shade. And I've actually found applying it over sort of light greens and things as well, sort of particularly works very well. Now, to finish the starting range off, they come with their own mixing medium, and this is, of course, is used if you want to dilute the paint but not lose any of the intensity of the shades. So here's our orc at the moment, and with all the base shades on him, and as you can see, I think he's looking particularly colourful. But let me show you now one of the things that I've mainly been using these shades for. So here is one of the Ragged Staff miniatures, which is going to be coming out soon. This is a 56mm version, and I have already base coated this with a steel colour. Now, I want to get a really nice armour colour over this, and my go-to would normally be something like the Strong Tone from Army Painter, but I found that liberally applying the Black Knight all over this works really, really well, and you will see why in a moment. Now, again, a little bit like with contrast paints and all things like, these high viscosity paints, you have to not let it pool unless you want an intense area of shadow. Now, it dries very quickly, and I've sort of coated the entire model here so you can see what the effect will be. But as you can see now, where it's dried, and it dries very matte, it really does come together really, really well. This is possibly my favorite wash now for doing armors. Now, obviously, if I wanted to do blackened armors or blued armors, that would be slightly different, but for a bog standard armor, I think this Black Knight wash is fantastic. One of the things that I've mentioned already is how these shades can be quite subtle. So here you can see I've undercoated a piece of Renedra Wattle fencing, and I've used the ossified earth colour from the Colour Forge spray range. And I'm just putting the hazel brown all over it. And as you can see, it just tints the base colour. It doesn't really change it that much. And I quite like this, and I like the subtlety because it means that you can actually build up layers, and you can just, you know, not worry about making a big mistake. Now, using the green dark color, I thought, let's see if we can just, you know, add on some areas to show a bit of rot or a bit of moss at the bottom. Now, as with everything else, this dried incredibly fast, and I was quite impressed by the results. And all this would need is basing up, and I'd be quite happy to throw this on the table as some wattle fencing around a medieval village or fantasy village or whatever. As you can see, they really are quite good at pulling those details out. Now, this is one of the models that I printed off and finished. You can find a link to the model down below. This model is actually free, a free file to print, and we needed this for Rangers of Shadow Deep, and I wanted to work on the flesh. Now, this is where these washes really helped me and came together. The human skin, the invocation purple, and the carmine dawn basically allowed me to add areas of bruising and highlights and shadows, and I think they just made the skin a lot more believable, especially around the face. Just adding a little bit of the invocation purple around his sagging bags under his eyes, and then some of the carmine dawn across his lips really helped me bring this model together. Now, I'm not a competition standard painter, I just like painting cool looking models. Adding a little bit of the human skin wash into the recesses around the muscles, I really think it helped to bring it together, and I really like this model, and it's something I'm quite proud of. Now, to show you a finished version of the knight that I showed previously from Ragged Staff Miniatures, here you go. So this is actually an even larger one that I printed off and painted, and all of the washes on here are these AK Interactive deep shades. All of the armor has been done with the Black Knight, and then I've used the Grime color to just sort of those areas that may not get cleaned or may be exposed to a little bit more dirt in the battle. I've added some of the Grime color over the Carmine Dawn over the nice red leather scabbard. I really think helps bring it together. And over the gold areas, I've actually used the Reddish Filth. I have come back in and just added a slight highlight afterwards with a much lighter gold, and I'm really pleased with this. This is also one of the first large-scale models I've ever painted, and I actually found these washes really helped. So there we have it. There's an overview there of the deep shade paints. Now, my key paints out of this that I think I used the most were the Human Skin, Pure Grime, Carmine Dawn, and Black Knight, and I will definitely be using these going forward. Now, I do think that these take some experimenting with, especially colours like this Reddish Filth, to find out how you're going to use it. The actual grippiness of the paint was something that actually surprised me. So if you don't expect it to flow all over the model, it will stay where you put it. Now, for a price point, these pots are going for £4.60 for a 30ml pot, but to give you an idea of comparison, the GW shades are on their website about £4.75 for an 18ml pot. So, like everything, you'll probably find these prices vary at friendly local gaming stores or other modelling shops as well. As I said, one of the things that I would probably change is, for me, I would rather these were in dropper bottles, but that's something that I can sort out myself. And to begin with, the range is fairly small. But if you're looking for shades and washes that actually do what they're designed to do, then I would give these a go. I think they're worth a look, especially if you enjoy your painting. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay tuned. We've got a lot more coming and more battle reports on the way as well. And I'm going to see if I can fit this orc into one of them, because I think he's going to have to stay like that. Anyway, let me know. What do you guys think? Are you tempted to try out the new deep shades? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you guys all again soon in the next one. Bye-bye.